very warm welcome today as we are giving tribute to late Shri Fali S. Nariman. May I request our Attorney General for India, Mr. R. Venkatri Ramanan, to be on the stage, please. Mr. Prashant Kumar, the President of Bar Association also. Mr. Amarjeet Singh Chandiok, President-elect. Mr. Janak Dwarkadas, Vice President, Bar Association of India. Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President, Bombay Bar Association. Dr. Lalit Bhasin, former President, Bar Association of India. Mr. Shyam Devan, Vice President, Bar Association of India. And Mr. Subhash Sharma, advocate who is also representing the family of late Fali S. Nariman. May I request Ms. Rachna Srivastav, Vice President, to give some introductory remarks.
Namaskar. Good morning, everybody. Today we have assembled here to commemorate and celebrate the life journey of late Shri Fali Nariman. May I request all of you to stand up for 2 minutes silence to pay tribute. Thank you very much. Mr. Acharya, please come in the front row. Mr. Acharya, Mr. B.B. Acharya. Shri R. Venkat Ramaniji, Attorney General for India. Mr. Prashant Kumar, President, Bar Association of India. Mr. Chandiok, President-elect, Bar Association of India. Shri Janak Dwarkadas ji, Vice President, Bar Association of India. Mr. Shyam Devan, Vice President, Bar Association of India and President, Law Asia. Dr. Lalit Bhasin, former President, Bar Association of India. Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President, High Court Bar Association. Mr. Subhash Sharma, Advocate. Mr. Acharya, our veteran participant all these conferences, former AG of Karnataka, Mr. Mukesh, Joint Secretary, Mr. Vibhu, Joint Secretary, Mr. Thaniru Srinivas, Joint Secretary, Bar Association of India, State Secretaries from various states, Meghalaya, Rajasthan, led by Mr. Roshan Lal Jain, Meghalaya led by Ms. Pooja, my other colleagues, members of the Bar Association of India, ladies and gentlemen. Introduction to Fali S. Nariman is like showing lamp to the sun. He was the Bhish Pitama of the legal fraternity. For the past several years, the Bar Association of India has been organizing the Rule of Law Convention annually. Shri Fali Nariman was President of India for 19 years, and he has always been associated with this annual convention. In this session, we commemorate and celebrate the journey of his life. Fali Nariman, often hailed as one of India's foremost legal luminaries, one of the most influential legal legends, has left an indelible mark on the country's legal landscape. His sharp intellect, unwavering integrity, and profound commitment to justice have inspired generations of lawyers. His contributions to constitutional law and his fearless advocacy for civil liberties will continue to resonate for years to come. Fali Nariman was born on 10th January 1929 in Rangoon. He was alumni of Government Law College, Bombay. He initially practiced in Bombay High Court and later shifted his practice to the Supreme Court of India. He was designated as senior advocate in the year 1971 and was appointed Additional Solicitor General of India in 1972. When emergency was imposed in the nation in the year 1975, in the aftermath of the then Prime Minister losing her election petition, which was filed to challenge her election as member of Lok Sabha, Mr. Nariman resigned in protest on the suppression of civil liberties. He was honored with Padma Bhushan in 1991 and with Padma Vibhushan in 2017, the third and second highest honors granted to a civilian by the President of India. Both awards were for Mr. Nariman's contribution to jurisprudence and public affairs. He was also a recipient of Gruber Prize for Justice in the year 2002. Shri Fali was President of the Bar Association of India from 1991 to 2010. He had been the President of Law Asia during the years 1985 to 1987. He was nominated member of the Rajya Sabha from 1999 to 2005. During his tenure as parliamentarian, he introduced 4 private members' bill in the Rajya Sabha, namely the Disruption of Proceedings of Parliament, Disentitlement of Allowances to Members Bill 2004, the Judicial Statistics Bill 2004, the Constitution Amendment Bill 2004 to amend Article 217 and 224 of the Constitution, the Representation of People's Amendment Bill 2004. He also raised questions relating to budget allocation for elderly persons, prohibition of contract labor, village public phones, and general issue relating to Central Vigilance Commission Bill 2003. He participated in debates on many government legislation and took interest in law-making process. A member of parliament wrote on his passing, "Alas, the brightness of his judicial life was so blinding that people didn't take adequate notice of his parliamentary life. Maybe in his passing we will stop and reflect on the life and works of Nariman as parliamentarian par excellence. The Indian parliament is richer today due to his debates, interventions, and time can never erode the pillar of strength that Nariman has added to the edifice of parliament and parliamentary democracy. Mr. Nariman's contribution towards developmental law is unaccounted. He practiced for 74 years. He appeared in several landmark cases. The list is very long, but to name a few: Golaknath case, S.P. Gupta case, TMFI Foundation, Supreme Court Advocate on Record Association, in which the Supreme Court took over the appointment of judges in higher judiciary, and in third and fourth judges case, the last one being where NJC was struck down, are his major contribution in the cases regarding judicial appointment. Apart from his autography, Before Memory Fades, Mr. Nariman authored several books, namely The State of the Nation, The Indian Legal System, Can It Be Saved? God Save the Supreme Court, You Must Know Your Constitution. Besides being a legal luminary, Mr. Nariman was a mentor to the young lawyers. I can share my personal experience. When I was young advocate, I was arguing in a court. The court was hostile. Court was asking several questions, and the bench was not with me at all. But I was well prepared. I responded to all the queries. and all my arguments were supported with the several rulings. I did not know that Mr. Nariman was also sitting in the court behind me. When the case got over, finally I was able to persuade the bench and the judgment was reserved. When I came out, Mr. Nariman also came out and he patted. He said, "Very well argued. Don't worry about the result. Your job is to argue. Press your point. Don't worry about the outcome. You have done your job well and keep doing it." Whenever I face a difficult court, his words still resonate in my ears. He was very strict during the conferences for the preparation of cases, but was amenable easily in the corridors of the court or library too. During his leisure time, when he was not appearing in court, he would often come to the library too and read newspaper or chit-chat with the lawyers sitting next to him. Once a lawyer, known for his candidness, asked Mr. Nariman, "Nariman साहब, आपकी practice कैसी चल रही है?" Nariman Saab was not offended, but he asked his staff to help him. Few months back, in his introductory remarks at Ashok Desai Memorial Lecture, he recounted fondly his days in Government Law College, where they were running a mock parliament. Late Shri Anil Dewan was the Prime Minister of that, Mr. Murli Bhandare was the Defence Minister, and late Soli Sorabri was the leader of opposition, while Mr. Ashok Desai was Chief Whip and Fali was elected as the Speaker. His address was full of wit and humor as he reminisced his past days. Passing of Fali on 24th February 2024 marks end of an era. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajani, for sharing your thoughts and your personal experience of your interaction with Mr. Nariman. May I now request our Attorney General, if he can speak few words and pay his tribute, as well as share his personal interaction with Mr. Nariman when he was there. We would love to hear that. Thank you.
Good morning, my dear friends from across different parts of the country. Bar Association of India, which has been nurtured over decades by the tallest leaders of the bar, with a vision that the legal fraternity has to play, will play in the affairs of the country. I find many young minds here, and it's a good sign that you engage your time and mind and invest them in the pursuit of the noblest of elements of the legal profession. To ask me to talk about Mr. Nariman is like asking a squirrel to talk about an elephant. And I'm standing here not as an Attorney General, but a fellow traveler in the legal profession who has watched, as I said, the tallest figures of the bar participating in the dialogues in the Supreme Court. I call them dialogues, the highest level of argument and in a sense dialogues with the court. So I have witnessed many such tall figures in the recounting from 1979 when I entered the Supreme Court, and much later when you become a little more mature about how to learn from what others have dialogued with the court. When you're young, you have a certain perspective. As you grow a little mature and your ability to catch and capture the nuances of the dialogue, then you become richer yourself. So in that sense, I could probably gather the most important elements of how the legal fraternity's role in dialoguing with the court and persuading the court to have what called evolve the public reasoning part of the legal fraternity's role. There I say that I have learned enormously from many of the tall members of the bar, more particularly Mr. Nariman. Bar room number 2 wrote an unwritten obituary the day after Mr. Nariman left us. Bar room number 2 was, I thought was vacant. From a chamber I went into bar room number 2 where I used to sit I thought there was something about that place where the loss was felt in more than one sense. So all of us have felt that loss in more than one sense. And many of us who moved very closely with him, not only in professional matter but otherwise, and trying to catch the best of one thoughts which could be shared while we are not in the court but outside the court, in libraries, in coffee rooms, or even otherwise congregations like this. So I say that I am therefore still a squirrel who is called upon to talk about an elephant. Now, the other day when the Supreme Court full court reference was about Mr. Nariman, I thought I will read out 2 paragraphs of my address before the court, which I think is probably apt not only to Mr. Nariman, to many, many tall leaders of the bar. And I am indeed happy to be today in the midst of very eminent members of the bar from different parts of the country, those who are in the dais, whom I know very well, who have performed and who have carried the what called the legacies of the role of the bar to higher levels. And I think that's the ultimate duty and responsibility of being a lawyer. And this is what is said in the court. With your permission, I will read out a couple of paragraphs. While liberty may lie in the hearts of all humans, it must also be secured to all and at all times. Resilient social norms and constitutional orders must also remain intact in the midst of waves of social and political misadventures. Constitutional architects who can dig deep and wide enough and who can transcend partisan ideological demands or political party affiliations and stand by these values occupy that sphere of liberty architects. Mr. Fali Nariman was one such architect. When we gather to pay homage to such giants who have not only enriched our jurisprudence, stood as an icon and taught the highest values of the profession, but showed us the courage and conviction to stand by values in other public callings, we find it difficult to gather our chronicles about them and to compress them in a very short while. Talk of the march of the Indian constitutional law without reference to Mr. Fali Nariman would be like marching with a flagpole without a flag. Having said that, when Prashant Kumar came the other day to have some exchanges of thoughts on some events to be in due course of time, so he gave to me the complete compilation of the President's page of the Indian lawyer from 1991 to 2005. Before I read out few parts of that President's page, which Mr. Nariman has eloquently penned over a period of time, today morning I thought, let me pen my few thoughts. And I sat down on my table around 8:30 in the morning and I wrote a handwritten piece, right? Let me take your permission. An extempore speech is always good because it receives the attention more than a written text speech. But I pardon you and take pardon from you, and let me read out few parts of what I wrote in the morning. Mr. Nariman was his own great instructor, and of him it may be said, his attainments in learning were nourished for the most part by the solitary vigil of his own genius. It seems nature gave him both a legal mind and a constitutional cultural mind. If the international community of arbitration lawyers and writers felt persuaded to call Mr. Nariman as an esteemed member of the global legal community and as their friend, it was owing to the fullest investment of his intellect, experience, insights, and above all, his felt sense of justice. The warm felicitations bestowed upon him in the rich collection of essays in his honor in the International Arbitration volume stand out as a global voice on his untiring contributions as a legal enthusiast ever ready to plow the world of justice. More than 8 volumes of memorials and writings about great American lawyers have been published. These are not mere hagiographies. They contribute to the connection between the bench, the bar, and the people. We are yet to undertake this engagement. I wish the Bar Association of India undertakes the engagement about the great lawyers from the entire vast north to west, south, east to west, and those unexplored areas of the Indian bar. Those of us who feel the inner fire of exploring the social world of ideas and institutions, the never-dying persuasions to plumb all territories of mind and the world, to profess and to propagate ends of justice, are truly the engineers of law. Mr. Nariman belonged to the long line of those brave in heart and strong in soul who glimpsed truths and delivered them in ecstasies of the mind. His all contribution to the Indian advocate, I would call them ecstasies of the mind in one sense. His presidentship of the Bar Association of India from 1991 to 2010 meant not only that there were no competitions, but that the idea of competition was never born. And so was his stature and his sailor-like qualities. Walter Raleigh was responsible for setting up the colony of Virginia in the United States. If this word can be extended to exploring unexplored fields, Mr. Nariman was an explorer. His contribution to the two Indian advocates from 1991 to 2005, as I said, present is battling those important themes of law, justice, constitution, legal fraternities, perennial duties, and asking questions about balancing conflicts and opposites in the world of doing justice. A collection of these which editorial comments would be a great piece of legal writing to be consumed by students and lawyers alike. When we talk today of the role of the legal fraternity and the enviable task we need to perform in the midst of challenging social, political, global, and other issues and I think it's important for us to gather how such people like Mr. Nariman were able to commit themselves to single-minded pursuit of how to enrich the quality of being a lawyer. To enrich the quality of being a lawyer is not merely a courtroom exercise. It's something beyond that. So unless you are truly committed to pursuing the depths and the width of law and its role in contemporary times, which are far more different from when Mr. Nariman entered the bar, I think it's important for us to look at what one could have done in the past 50, 75 years and look at what one could gather from these contributions and what we could do. So a tribute like this is not merely a morning coffee day issue. It's something beyond that. It's something which is, for me, emotional, intellectual, and also what one may call the compendium of perspectives on what one human being could be as a lawyer. So let us look at the role, the lives, and the contributions made by such tall figures from more than one angle. We may talk about the courtroom genius of Mr. Nariman, as people used to talk about the courtroom genius of Mr. Palkiwala. Many of us have a courtroom geniuses. I find my lawyers, my very eminent lawyers friends on the dais who are courtroom geniuses. And many of us would like to be that. But as long as we remain only that and we don't go beyond the courtroom genius, in a way a courtroom genius also probably comprehend how do you look at the society at large and what impact and what I do as a lawyer will have on the society. So all these very important questions, I think, will enter the minds of the legal fraternity today. And that's the only way, perhaps, as members of the Bar Association of India, would be paying rich tributes to the memory of Mr. Nariman. I'll just conclude by reading a couple of his writings in the Indian Advocate, which I thought was very telling. In one of his very concerned pieces on the role of the legal fraternity, he talked about the role of auditors in the corporate sector. Now, it's one inimitable style he writes, brings a very commonplace incident with humor, satire, and all that, which is very Nariman's forte. Now, in this article written in 2003, he talks about the auditor as a watchdog. And he quotes the Conan Doyle story. Let me read it, and the conversation between Sherlock Holmes and Conan Doyle. For more than a century, the auditor had been characterized as a watchdog, not a bloodhound. A nice picturesque expression providing a smokescreen for excusing liability. What happens when the watchdog does not watch? The answer is contained in that much publicized extract on one of the Conan Doyle stories. Quote, is there any point to which you would wish to draw my attention as the chief of police? Yes, says Sherlock Holmes, to the curious incident of the dog in the night time. But the dog did nothing in the night time, said the police chief. Oh, that was a curious incident, is the now famous response. The dog doing nothing at the right time is what is curious about the dog doing nothing. Too often I regret to say the watchdogs of large corporations have done little or nothing, either in the night time or in the daytime, prompting one Canadian judge to say that the auditor as a watchdog is obliged to bark at least once in a while. We are not called upon to bark. We are more than the night dogs. We are more than night dogs who would not bark at all. So he says that, first goes further and says about how, the next page, he writes about American Bharatiya Task Force on Corporate Responsibility in his final report urging changes in corporate governance policies to create a new culture of corporate responsibility, assessing constructive skepticism and active independent oversight of corporate executives. I just substitute cooperation with society, you get what the legal fraternity may have to do. And he says it's wishful thinking to believe that the codes of ethics will help to change things. They never have, neither for judges nor for lawyers or other professionals. Codes have been tried in various jurisdictions and found to be of little practical utility. I suppose each one of us are codes unto themselves. And that's what I gather from Mr. Nariman's life. And he talks about how the invisible role, he says in the same article further, the phrase adding value is best defined by the reference to the vision of a great lawyer, John Davis, who way back in 1946 addressed the Association of Arts of the City of New York with these memorable words. I quote, true, we build no bridges, we raise no towers, we construct no pictures. There is little of all that we do with the eyes of man can see. But we smooth out difficulties, we relieve stress, we correct mistakes, we take up other men's burdens, and by our efforts make possible the peaceful life of men in a peaceful state. The peaceful life of men in a peaceful state. I think the Bar Association of India is wedded as a company of lawyers to ensure that we are all committed to the peaceful life of human beings and in a peaceful state. And there are many more. I keep reading it again and again. I find the riches and the treasure that I can gather. Probably one day when I have a little more time, I would not only write a few editorial notes on this, probably pen a poem on what a lawyer's life can be if it's like more than the adventure of Columbus. And in a way, Mr. Nariman was a Columbus in his own way. So let us be all those great explorers of the physical world. Let's become explorers of the justice world. Exploring the justice world is a huge task. But I suppose the Bar Association of India is committed to that. And it's truly fitting today that we are gathered to honor and pay tributes to a great person who explored the world of justice. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your personal thoughts and reintroducing us to the passages which he had written. I'm sure most of us will go back and try to read what he has written in our Indian Advocate Journal, and maybe we'll put it up on our website also so that we have the benefit of accessing all the record. Now, thanks to virtual reality and technology, we have virtual messages of some of his friends and colleagues which we'd like to play on the screen. And I'll start with Mr. K.K. Venugopal's virtual message, who was the former Attorney General for India, as well as a close friend of late Mr. Fali Nariman.
Oh, it's a privilege to be given an opportunity to say a few words about the late Fali Sam Nariman, who was a constitutional expert par excellence, an icon at the bar, an outstanding parliamentarian, a proud Parsi, a loving husband and father, brilliant writer, stupendous orator, erudite jurist, Padma Award in 1991 and 2007. The list is endless. It was a pleasure to listen to Fali because be it an interview or lecture, it would be well researched and interspersed with jokes and anecdotes. His trademark chuckle that followed a witty joke or a bluntly honest statement is one that will be remembered by all who knew him. He was unmatched as a raconteur, for he would marry wit with knowledge and wisdom. I caught him on a flight once, engrossed in a book on the life of the law lords, which would explain his vast wealth of anecdotes, which embellished his writings and talks. In the early years of his career, he had appeared in the Golaknath case and assisted Nani Palkiwala, leading to a historical judgment that intended to serve as a check on Parliament's power to amend the fundamental rights in Part 3 of the Constitution. Incidentally, the Golaknath case was, according to Fali, the first big case of his career. My father, M.K. Nambiar, had appeared as the lead counsel. At a lecture delivered in 1987 on the judiciary and the role of the pathfinder, Fali recounted a conversation with my father, where my father, who had moved a petition in the Supreme Court challenging the constitutional amendments which placed various Land Reforms Act in the 9th schedule, had expressed that he was not at all hopeful that the petition would be admitted. However, to his utter surprise, not only was it admitted, but it was referred to a large bench, a constitutional bench, for final hearing. The seats of the basic structure doctrine shown in the Golaknath case was accepted by the Supreme in the case 1 in the Bharatiya case. Fali staunchly defended our constitutional ideals, oftentimes with great vigor than the very institution tasked with upholding the Constitution. In the TMA Pai Foundation case, he argued for the rights of minorities, leading to the recognition of autonomy of private educational institutions under the Constitution. In the NJSC case, which involved a challenge to the National Judicial Appointments Commission on being asked as to whom he was appearing for, Fali retorted to the 5 judges bench that he was appearing for the independence of the judiciary. The NJSC case was a culmination of the journey that had commenced with the first judge's case, the SP Gupta's case, and was overruled in the second judge's case, whereto Fali had appeared. But he has expressed his view that the collegium system hasn't worked at all. In Nabam Arabia, Fali appeared for the House Whip and argued that the governor did not have the power to advance the assembly session, which could only be done on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. He represented the state of Karnataka in the Kaveri dispute case, which is a bitter fight for a share of the river waters between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. There is virtually no area of the law where Fali did not leave an indelible stamp. From constitutional and public law, company law, arbitration, each facet of our jurisprudence has been enriched by his invaluable and immeasurable contribution. He was a recognized name, not merely in India, but in international circles as well. He represented India before various international dispute resolution forums, such as the arbitral tribunal constituted under the Indus Waters Treaty to decide the Kishanjanga dispute in Pakistan. He served as the honorary president of the International Council of Commercial Arbitration and also as a member of the Advisory Board of the ICCA. In his autobiography, Before Memory Fades, Fali has profoundly mentioned that over the course of years at the bar, he had come to the realization that justice is elusive, sometimes unpredictable, and often unsatisfying. He therefore lived to his tenant, advocated by Lord Denning and Justice Nyaya, that compassion is extraordinarily important in the law, and has famously said that law is a matter of the heart as well as of the head. Fali's life was a journey where each step taken was decided by the path of righteousness. It was a life of high integrity and ethics. While representing the Gujarat government in relation to the Narmada rehabilitation project, he again decided to withdraw from the case in protest against the harassment of Christians and the burning of the Bible, which was taking place at the time. He was quick to act whenever there was injustice being done, just as he has resigned as Additional Solicitor General a day after the emergency was declared. His professional stature and eminence led to his nomination to the Rajya Sabha by the President of India in 1999. He served a full 6-year term with great distinction, actively participating in the deliberation in India's highest legislative chamber. His dedication to public causes, close to his heart, led him to move private members' bills, including a bill to amend the constitution and prohibit members of parliament from claiming allowances during the days on which the proceedings of parliament are adjourned due to deceptions caused by the members, either individually or collectively. Fali practiced law for nearly 70 years. From 1949 till his passing away on the 21st February 2024. I am told that even on the previous day he was correcting written submissions in a constitutional bench matter, and his passing away is a profound loss to the nation, for I do not foresee another like him for many generations to come. I would be remiss in my tribute to Fali if I do not mention that he was a family man. He shared a close bond with his wife Babsi and his children and grandchildren. He adored his wife, who passed away a few years earlier in 2020. Their partnership brings to mind a statement by Homer in the Odyssey, and quote, "There is nothing nobler or more admirable than when two people see eye to eye because and keep house as a man and wife, confounding their enemies and delighting their friends." His children, daughter Sanhita and son Justice retired Rohinton Nariman, daughter-in-law Nyaya Nariman, who has a PhD in education, as well as his granddaughter Nina, a lawyer, Krushit, a sculptor, all of whom I knew very well as being very fine individuals. I may add that Justice Rohinton had been my chamber junior, and I can confidently say that all his father's admirable qualities, particularly in the thirst for knowledge, has multiplied manifold in Rohinton. I remember being told of an episode when father and son were interested in Western classical music, and Fali would be asked by the presenter to identify a musical piece, and he would nudge the young boy, who would quickly whisper to him, "The Blue Danube" by Strauss. Fali himself had spoken highly of Rohinton's phenomenal memory, who was ordained as a priest at the young age of 12, and could recite long passages from memory in Avesta, the scriptural language of the Zoroastrianism. If a man can bridge the gap between life and death, if he can live on after he is gone, then he was indeed a great man. Through his interviews, lectures and writings, from which one can garner the deep convictions he had about the ideals of our nation, Fali Nariman lives on.
Thank you, Mr. Venugopal. Even one day before his passing away, he was correcting written submissions. Shows how fertile, how eagerness was there to work and to do something for our profession. Now we have Honorable Miss Sujata V. Manohar's virtual message, a former judge of Supreme Court of India.
I am happy that the Bar Association of India has dedicated this Rule of Law Convention to an outstanding jurist, a brilliant advocate, and above all, a great human being, Fali Nariman, who was its ex-president. He was also the first Indian president of Law Asia. Many distinctions were conferred on him in the course of his amazing career. He was much more than the offices he occupied. He spent his life upholding the rule of law. At a critical period in our history, he upheld the main pillars on which our Constitution stands. He had the courage to resign as Additional Solicitor General of India when emergency was announced, although no other law officer of Government of India followed in his footsteps. The nation will forever be grateful to him for its freedoms and its democratic rights. It is only appropriate that the Rule of Law Convention should be dedicated to him. He joined the Bombay Bar in 1950 and joined the legendary Jamshedji Kanga's chambers. The Bombay Bar at the time had a galaxy of brilliant young lawyers who were making their mark in the profession. And Fali was one of their leaders. Fali was a complete lawyer, a lawyer who excelled in law. His advocacy was extremely effective. He was a lawyer who believed in the rule of law and in the Constitution. He believed in democratic values and upheld people's fundamental rights, secularism and equality before the law for all. Above all, he strove to ensure independence of the judiciary. There is a Zoroastrian prayer which equates truth as happiness. It says, "Happiness comes to him who, for the sake of truth, follows the path of truth." Much happiness was bestowed on Fali Nariman during his long lifetime. He will be remembered for his forthright and fearless expression of views and for his wonderful sense of humor which never left him. His juniors have lovely stories about his interactions with them and with the court, and about his brilliant insights into law. He was great, yet gentle and unassuming. Above all, for me, he was a dear friend, and we shall miss him. Let me end by quoting him. "Howsoever old you be, or howsoever old you get, have the vigor and enthusiasm of youth to appreciate the enormity and magnificence of the law, and the will to unravel the mysteries and the mistakes in the law." May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Justice Manohar. We have now a virtual message of Mr. Iqbal M. Chagla, Senior Advocate.
Extraordinary is not a word that I use lightly or often, but whenever I think of Fali Nariman, or speak of him That is the adjective that comes incessantly to mind. Extraordinary lawyer, to which so many people have spoken, extraordinary advocate, and to which I am a witness as a junior appearing with him in a difficult case with a hostile bench. By lunch, the hostility had melted away, and by the end of the day, Fali had woven his magic and he had won the day. But whatever you may say about his being a lawyer, about his advocacy, it's extraordinary that we do not have words adequate enough to sum up the essence of this great man. And that is the charm, the warmth, and to which I fell victim very early in my life. When I came from England and joined the bar, I was lost in what I can only describe as the organized confusion of the Bombay bar. And Fali took me by the hand and led me through this. And one of the first things he did was to take me up to the third floor of the Bombay High Court and made me enroll in what he described as the greatest institution, the Bombay Bar Association. And most importantly, he admitted me to his lunch table, the most envied table in the Bombay High Court. The 45 minutes that we had in those days, later enlarged to 1 hour, that we spent on everything except serious talk, no talk of law, no talk of judgments. It was just laughter and relaxation. Absolutely. And leading the charge was always Fali, with anecdotes, with stories, and hilarity. His smile, his laughter, and we were the envy of all the other members, and many an attempt was made to storm that citadel, but all rejected firmly, politely, but firmly. And this is where I spent the next 60 years. We were a happy, happy table. Fali to me was just more than the greatest lawyer that this country has known, which of course he was. Because for me, it's not so much the lawyer or the advocate that I shall miss. It is Fali the man, the essence of the man, that Faliness that I will miss.
Thank you, Mr. Chagla. That was waving magic, what you said. Now we have Mr. Dato Cyrus Das, Senior Advocate, who has also given his virtual message.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. I thank Shri Prashant Kumar, President of the Bar Association of India, for inviting me to join in this commemorative event to remember and celebrate the life of the late Shri Fali Nariman. I pay a solemn tribute from a jurisdiction outside India to this great advocate. The late Fali Nariman was well known to the bar in my country when, as the president of Law Asia in the 80s, he visited Malaysia often and took part in the Law Asia conferences hosted by us and in our own annual conferences. A place was always reserved for him to address a plenary session because of his great skills of speech and advocacy. He almost always spoke of the Indian Constitution and of the great advances made by the Indian Supreme Court, and of course, some of the regresses during an earlier period. I got to know him well on his visits and was struck by his sense of humor and the inevitable chuckle in his voice. He was a known jurist and a prolific writer of legal articles and books. From this plenitude of material, there was one piece that caught my interest, his article on the importance of advocacy in constitutional cases. He wrote of the need for a good advocate in the field of constitutional law to be driven by what he termed, and I quote, the requisite aspiration, an aspiration which he defined later as the need for the courts to take custody of the Constitution, presumably from a passing or root majority in Parliament. In this piece, he traced the arguments of the advocates in the great constitutional cases in your country over a 70-year period, advancing the frontiers of safeguards and liberties, in particular, the incremental steps leading to the acceptance of the basic structure doctrine in constitutional law. This doctrine today enjoys a diaspora beyond India. Great judgments originate from great arguments at the bar. I had no doubt as I read the article that the late Fali Nariman was speaking of himself and of his own experiences, although in typical fashion was too modest to acknowledge it. His career at the private bar, and I believe a stint in public service, was geared towards adherence to the rule of law, and to those in authority, a reminder from the old adage attributed to Thomas Fuller, be you ever so high, the law is above you. Ladies and gentlemen, great advocates and great judges share a common platform in remembrance. They remain on record in the law reports for posterity, never to be forgotten. Truly, it may be said of this great advocate, as Longfellow said, and I quote, "When a great man dies, for years the light he leaves behind lies on the paths of men." Unquote. I take this opportunity to convey my wishes on this solemn occasion to Justice Rohinton and to all members of the family of this great advocate and to the Bar of India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Das, for sharing your interaction in Malaysian and how it has impacted the Malaysian bar. May I now request Mr. Prashant Kumar, the President of Bar Association of India, to pay his tribute.
Good morning. We have a galaxy of legal luminaries and stalwarts of Indian bar gathered here to pay tribute to Fali Nariman, who was president of the Bar Association of India for 2 decades, with Mr. Lalit Bhasin as General Secretary. Friends, I am getting into this sequence just by virtue of holding a position. But when Attorney General says that he is like a squirrel before the greatness, elephantine greatness of Fali Nariman, I am just an ant. But from an ant's perspective, I can see the enormity of his stature in much more bigger proportion to grasp and to admire. The Bar Association of India was always an extended family for Fali, and he never grew far from it. For all the endeavors we had been doing, even if he is not a part of it, a short email or a letter will validate what we are doing and will give us enormous confidence and belief that in some measure we are able to carry forward his legacy, which we are committed to do. Mr. Chagla told about being admitted to his lunch table. During all the time I was attending the executive committee meeting, we always had the refreshments ordered by Fali, and they were all each time very consistent, from an old bakery in Connaught Place, Wenger's, and there'll be a pastry, a cake, a veg sandwich, a non-veg sandwich, a veg patty and a non-veg patty, and coffee and tea. And on one occasion, we were having our meeting in Solicitor General's chambers, and by mistake, late P.P. Rao happened to pick and bite chicken patty. And being a South Indian Brahmin, having a bite of non-veg, everybody was looking. He said, "What is this? A chicken patty." Somehow I said, but sir, the chicken was vegetarian. And Fali had that kind of spontaneous laughter. Oh, baby, chicken was vegetarian, so don't mind. So this is how he was able to just meld with all of us. In the beginning, it was quite strange for me as a rank newcomer at the bar and to the Bar Association to, come to terms for addressing him as Fali. Because, here we all use G, the surname, and never the first name, but, we got used to it. And that created a kind of bond where you could have a conversation, which always he liked, to hear your thoughts, not just give his own. Another thing why we have dedicated this rule of law convention to his memory, because it is keeping him in mind that this convention was launched, because he was always the soldier of the rule of law, of the independence of judiciary, and of independence and fearlessness of legal profession. And for the first convention, he said we should invite somebody who epitomizes rule of law. So we did not go for a Chief Justice or a sitting judge or anyone. We had the former Chief Justice J.S. Verma to inaugurate the first rule of law convention. Because in Fali's mind, he was the one who stood for the moral sanctity, and along with him was a moral compass for the nation. He was also of the view that in working sessions, inviting judges to chair or to speak inhibits free and frank discussion. So he always discouraged it, unless until he said you find that a judge is a domain expert. Otherwise, let the bar has fearless free flow of discussion. And that is the practice we have followed in the Bar Association of India. Everyone talks about his contribution where he led the arguments in the NJAC case. Now there is another dimension here, which we as a small team, along with Subhashji, Anandita, myself, were assisting Fali, majorly Subhash, but Fali always was ready to chat and listen to you. Even at some times, he would say, why you want to give this? If other side has that, this will fall very badly on you. Because these are the aspects we will miss. We will think that this particular article aspect is in our favor, but Fali could immediately grasp that how it could be used by the other side. That was his vibrant strategic mind. And when the court asked, whom do you represent? And his famous answer that I represent independence of judiciary has a small story behind it. We had several events on the Bar Association of India and at several other fora. Fali very energetically led the charge against the collegium system, according to which it had failed. And he was the staunchest critic. But then when this formulation came as a constitution amendment, he had to take up cudgels to challenge it. Now, to balance this, his open advocacy against the collegium system and then to attack the formulation which has come was not a delicate task. He was representing Advocates on Record Association, and perhaps in the beginning of his thought process, Subhash ji can enlighten more. He thought that the previous NDA government had appointed Venkatachalaya Commission, and it is Venkatachalaya Commission which had recommended the formation of a judicial appointment commission, which had a judicial majority, but a law minister a member as well. But later on, through discussions and other things, and that is much more validated in today's age of social media and anybody posting any comment. Even if you have the most independent, dedicated to judicial independence law minister, still just imagine a law minister sitting every couple of weeks with the judges to discuss appointments as a closed group in a closed room, and simultaneously those very judges are hearing contested cases of seminal importance. This very combination and these frequent meetings, because you have to make appointments not just to Supreme Court but all the high courts in enormous numbers, what it could have led in terms of public speculation, undermining not just the appointments but the very sanctity of judicial process. So when we discussed that, and we had filed a second petition from the Bar Association of India, in which we said that even having a law minister is going to be perilous to independence of judiciary and working of an independent court. So that's why when the question came, because the judges had read the prayer, that whom do you represent? Then Fali said, independence of judiciary, because he was not going to any longer press for Venkatachalaya commissions to be recommended. The other thing which is often spoken about is that Fali, for 38 years, had only one junior. So it is not just that he got tremendous assistance from him in terms of legal research, formulation of arguments, and making him prepare. Fali was always all chaos. We saw him each argument, each strand of thought in one pocket, in the other pocket, in this pocket, in that pocket, and in which pocket what is where. Even Fali will not know. But there was another reason. Subhash is from the Hindi heartland, much more earthy compared to the urbane sophistication of Fali. So while choosing the junior and sticking with him for 38 long years, the same way, we had same menu every executive committee meeting, there was another reason behind. He used him as a sounding board, as a contrarian, as a junior who could speak up and connect him to the soil. That was something which only a master like him could cherish and get from somebody. So that is another part, as another, junior I can feel, that how not only the seniors nurture a junior, how they utilize the strengths, the character, the lived experience of a junior or the one assisting them. And that is a unique greatness of Fali as well. The other thing is, as all of us could address him as Fali. the most endearing trait of his character was lack of any pretensions whatsoever. He could talk to any junior with a kind of comfort level you cannot imagine. You always hesitated and stood apart. But once you said hello and he came back with an answer, how are you, what you do, and all with that, his, that very sublime baritone, you were drawn into his circle. And for rest of your life, you were never out of it. I can speak endlessly because in Bar Association of India, we discussed so many things. We went to so many places within the country and outside. We had his company, not just in court, but on travel, him and Bapsi. It can be endless because that warmth, that feeling of closeness, one can never get over. So, only one thing I will say more. One of my favorite writers is Milan Kundera, who wrote about the Central Europe, which was still under socialist and communist regime, and represented a very unique sensibility in his writings. So, in one of his novels, which is called Farewell Waltz, Fali, he wrote, a long time ago, a certain cynic philosopher proudly paraded around Athens in a moth-eaten coat, hoping that everyone would admire his contempt for convention. When Socrates met him, he said, "Through the hole in your coat I see your vanity. Your dirt too, dear sir, is self-indulgent, and your self-indulgence is dirty." Fali was never self-indulgent. He was always trying to learn, shape, and modify his thoughts. And now he is no more with us. I hope that Socrates, who must be stiff bored, will getting all these people full of vanity even in heaven for a company, to get now Fali with him without pretensions. And I can imagine that in heaven Socrates will welcome him and give him a warm hug. With this, I want all of you to have the warm and fond memories of Fali, and for that we have published and given to you the compilation of President pages written by him over 20 years for Indian Advocate. I hope that it will help you, you will cherish it, and you will treasure it, as is the memory of Fali. Thank you.
Thank you, President, for sharing and regaling us with your personal interaction with Fali S. Nariman, as well as the Patty incidents, and shedding some light on the dynamics between Subhashji and Mr. Nariman. Now may I request Mr. Amarjit Singh Chandiok, our President-elect, to pay his tribute to Mr. Nariman.
Learned Attorney General, my seniors and stalwarts of the bar on the dais, off the dais, I think Prashant was very right. I don't think even 2 hours of a tribute session can even pay tribute to what he has done in our lives. To me, today was the need for him to live when we lost him. Today was the need for a person like him to lead us, guide us, tell us how do we say what he said, independence of judiciary. But well, God has his own ways of doing things. To speak about him, to my mind, is trying to contain an ocean in a small turn, which is not possible. To talk to him, the more one says, the more remains. After listening to my president of his interactions, it came to me that I was in a senior's chamber and a writ petition was filed, which was before Justice Deshpande and who was at that time ASG. The question was with respect to a unauthorized construction in Connaught Place. So I went on because the Senate couldn't do, passover was fought. Anyways, I think in 15 minutes I must have said Mumty on the top is not unauthorized construction. And Fali Sahab was not able to understand what is Mumty is talking about. So he tells the Honorable Judge, I think you have adjourned this case or put it after lunch. I first want to learn from this young boy, what does Mumty mean? What is unauthorized construction now? So that was the vision of a person who would stand with a youngster and tell him, I want to learn from you, what is it? How many of us can do that today? Is a question we must ask ourselves. Let me give you something more personal. Every year one had the opportunity to wish him on his birthday, and next day the acknowledgement would come. This year, when I wished him, and when I sent the flowers to him, I also wrote the name of my family, including my daughter, little granddaughter. And came the reply next day, first addressing to my granddaughter, thank you so much for addressing. This was the person, a human being, that Mr. Fali Nariman was. If we take it to the learned Attorney General said he enriched the bar. I think is all what we have published today, as the President said. If we read them through, you will even find that he was one who supported a strike when Section 30 of the Advocates Act was not being notified by the government. So look at all his facets, whether you talk about him in court, whether you talk about him as a human being, whether you talked about him as a person, and above all, he will tell you about your religion, which probably you don't know yourself. And he would explain to you how the oneness is common between us, and that oneness should take us to the next decade. So why should remember when one went for a briefing, Fali Sahab, so after he had heard the facts of the case, he says, do you think you're thorough with your facts? If you're not, we'll postpone to next day, so that you come thorough. Unless you understand and thoroughly understand the facts, your thought process in your brief will never go. And that's the lesson one learned way back in 78. It's still, it looks ringing in my ears. The person as a human being, I think everybody has said so, I do not want to repeat. But today the need of the hour is, as people said, that he would not talk to you only on the phone. He would meet you across the corridors of the Supreme Court, High Court, wherever he met you. He will stop, talk to you, wish you, ask you about your family, and then move forward. Therefore, these kinds of stalwarts would be missed in our bar today. In fact, all this technology is fine, but to me, the interaction, personal, should be more important than the technology that we have to adopt. We must take it as a tool. That's the understanding that I get from him. Who was Fali Nariman Sahib? He was a great man whom I fortunately enough to come in contact with. He never tried to be great, but greatness grew in him without his knowledge or consent. He was a master storyteller as I think Mr. Chadla also said, no doubt, whether it was public speech or a briefing session, stories would come. In one of his articles or speech, he had said that a client in his attempt to win in arbitration decided to kidnap the arbitrator. Likewise, he would tell many more court stories, incidents which will not find anywhere. I think that's the way we need to look at. Where do we find, and I think Subhash would be able to help us in this regard, to see where do we find all this and then publish it, put it in public domain so that our generations that are coming to look at that legacy and adopt it in whatever manner we can. Once he told a group of us who met him at a bar association matter the story about what happened to Union government's application for reconsideration of Keshavan Bharati's case. For 2 days, late Mr. Palkiwala argued the matter. Some of the judges accepted his arguments on the very first day, the others on the next day, except the Chief Justice, who ultimately, we all know, dissolved the bench and the matter came to an end. So all that effort we saw happening in court and saw him withstanding that part with them. In fact, in a letter that he wrote to Dharma Bhandari Sahib in 12 January 2017, it has been just circulated amongst in the social media very recently. With his departure, we have lost a single source we have been having who could lead us authoritatively on the history of our Constitution, the principles thereof, and the need that we need to do to strengthen the rule of law. That's why I think the rule of law is important, and the Bar Association decided that it must be delegated to Mr. Nariman. I think he's one of the few persons who was designated senior at the age of 42, and from there he took cuddles with everything possible. And I don't know whether Subhash would remember, 3 points were given in a briefing, and he thought that was useless. But when he came to the court, he first said, will you remind me of those 3 points? They are worth looking at and worth mentioning to the court. So these are aspects that we need to learn. We need to adopt, not only learn, we need to adopt. And once we adopt that, I'm sure, notwithstanding the dark clouds that many of us feel are coming, notwithstanding that a young lawyer came up to me and said, how does the Supreme Court judge does not know what is Order 11 rule CPC? I said, well, he never did probably the original side work, so he doesn't know Order 11. He said, then he should buy training. And I was arguing he doesn't even understand what Order 11 is. Therefore, we need to learn from stalwarts like him what we need to do in our law, whether it is fundamental, whether it is collectively, whether what we have to address. And as Prashant just now said, how will your document be read by the other side is a training that he would give you. So we need to look at all that aspects and adopt them in our life while paying my humble tribute to him, my colleague and stalwart, who told me to see just what is happening, but see what is going to happen. I have to conclude by saying our deepest feelings are the hardest to express. With a drop of tear, I salute you, sir. May your soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandyok, and sharing this attention to detail and his humbleness. How he wrote, addressed your granddaughter first, and these are stories we'll carry with us. May I now request Mr. Janak Dwarkadas, our Vice President, to please say a few words. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. The year was 1972. I was all of 17 years old, pursuing a BCom degree. I was traveling to Delhi for the first time with a friend. At that time, my father, who was a tax lawyer, was trying very hard, albeit unsuccessfully, to persuade me to join the legal profession after my studies. Since I was headed to Delhi, my father thought that if I met his friend Fali S. Nariman, who was at that time the additional Solicitor General of India, I would be influenced by his dynamic personality to pursue law. So my father wrote out a letter of introduction that I carried with me to Delhi. But my nerve failed me and I missed the opportunity to meet Fali, much to the disappointment of my father. By some quirk of fate, I did end up joining the bar in the year 1977. I was privileged to join the chambers of Iqbal Chagla. At that time, Iqbal was sharing a tiny antechamber with his senior, Kharshedji Baba. That chamber had been allotted by Kharshedji to Fali. What a coincidence. By May 1992, Fali had migrated to Delhi. He was, however, a frequent visitor to Mumbai. And as Mr. Chagla told you all, when I joined Mr. Chagla, I was also privileged to be part of the lunch table on the third floor of the Bombay Bar Association, which Mr. Nariman used to frequent quite often on his trips to Bombay. Whenever he was in Bombay, Fali had to be at the lunch table, and he would look forward to being there as much as we would look forward to having him share all his anecdotes. And in the 45 minutes that we had the lunch break between 2 and 2:45, one really got an opportunity to get to know Fali, not as an advocate or a lawyer, but Fali as a man. And what most people or most lawyers would think of Fali, I, on the other hand, discovered that Fali was much more than just an advocate, a great advocate and a great lawyer. He had a great sense of humor. He was a great mimic. He was a great raconteur of stories. He was full of interesting and humorous anecdotes about matters in court, judges and solicitors. He was kind and compassionate. A Mrs. Gracious, who ran a small canteen and who was widowed, was the biggest beneficiary of his compassion. Whenever there was a meeting requisition in the Bombay Bar Association to replace her, Fali would appeal to the members and the resolution would be dropped. Fali took his profession very seriously, but never took himself seriously. One trait that stood out about him was that he hardly ever spoke about his own cases, or as most of us are wont to do as lawyers, I said this to the judge, I said that to the judge. You would never hear it from the mouth of Fali Nariman, even though he may have argued the most seminal cases. Another striking feature of his personality was that I never heard Fali speak ill about anyone, either at the bar or otherwise. As long as he was around at the lunch table, you would only hear the sound of loud guffaws and laughter from all of us seated around him from time to time. There was never a serious or a dull moment. And yet virtually, as if the stage lights had been turned off, come 2:45, and Fali would become Fali Nariman, the most formidable lawyer and advocate, and in a trice he would be gone, rushing down to the High Court library or to the courts. In the course of his visits to Mumbai, Fali gave me 3 invaluable pieces of advice. The first, always pay your taxes and sleep well. This advice he gave me despite the fact that Fali himself would have paid tax at the highly extortionate rate of tax, personal income tax of 97.75% prior to 1975. The second thing he told me was never refuse a brief before any court, tribunal, or administrative authority. And in his trademark booming voice, he would say, remember, the smaller the man, the greater the ego. That's where you learn to deal with judges. The third piece of advice was never underestimate the importance of pleadings. And for the younger lawyers who are present in the audience, I can remember Fali's words and Fali's voice telling me, pleadings are the foundation of a case. Pleadings are the foundation. Show me, he would shout at us. Show me where is this pleaded. And the minute you showed him, he would dissect it, bisect it, and he would tell you, see, this is what is wrong with it. He would go to court and demolish the case of the other side on the lack of pleadings alone. Later in my career, when I was visiting Delhi and had occasion to appear with Fali, he would often request me to stay back in the evening and join him for drinks and dinner. Bapsi and Fali made the most gracious hosts. And the evening would just fly by with Fali holding forth, regaling us with countless stories and anecdotes, and once again, without talking about his own cases. When one looks back on all of Fali's achievements, both in his personal and professional life, one realizes that they are far too many and so diverse that there may never be another like him. He was truly one of a kind. He leaves behind so many lessons which any lawyer, young or old, could benefit by. The most extraordinary qualities of Fali, the advocate, which I consider worth emulating, are 1. Passion for the law. Anyone who has seen Fali in conferences or in court could not have missed his devotion to and the passion he displayed for the law. Law, they say, is a jealous mistress, but Fali was truly and madly in love with the profession. It is said, only passions, great passions, can elevate the soul to great things. The second extraordinary quality of Fali was curiosity, which I considered was virtually Fali's second nature. Socrates was known for his curiosity. He emphasized the importance of questioning and testing the foundations of knowledge and wisdom. Socrates said, the only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. Like Socrates, Fali used to say, the more I practice the law, the less I seem to know about it. Like Socrates, Fali would fire off an endless barrage of questions to the team assisting him, never satisfied till he felt he had the right answer. And of course, even thereafter, he could start off all over again, sometimes questioning even his own notes and conclusions. Industry. My father always said work has never killed anybody. In all the years that I have spent at the bar, I do not think I have come across anyone, young or old, who displayed greater industry than Fali. This despite the fact that Fali probably had the ablest minds assisting him and the highest level of experience. Perseverance. It is said, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. The fact that Fali may have lost more cases than he may have won never made him give up his pursuit for excellence. He always said, winning cases is not the measure of success, because if that were so, I have lost more cases than I have won. Tenacity. It is said the most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is mere tenacity. Nobody who has seen Fali argue or has been at the receiving end on the other side can dispute the fact that Fali was one of the most tenacious lawyers that India has produced. And yet, he never attacked his opponent. He was never overbearing towards the judges. With all the tenacity at his command, there was never any rancor or ill will towards either the counsel, the solicitor, or the client on the other side. Only Fali's advocacy remained forceful. Humility. It is said pride is concerned with who is right. Humility is concerned with what is right. Having got to know Fali over the years as a person, what I found most endearing about his character was that he treated every individual alike, be he a peon or the senior most member of the bar or the bench or any other person who may be highly placed. I have never seen Fali throw his weight or reputation around. However much the provocation either from the bar or the bench, Fali never talked down to anybody. Anticipation. Fali was like a chess player. He could anticipate the course and destiny of a matter even before the case had begun. He was not only a mind reader, but could also read the lips of judges, which put Fali far ahead of his rivals. Discipline. Fali epitomized what a disciplined life can be. In mind, body, and soul, he led an extremely disciplined life. Whether it was food, drink, exercise, or work, it was always well regulated. Fali believed in the adage that when you work, and when you play, you play. He never mixed the two. He never believed in resting on his laurels. He never let his success slow him down, nor did he forsake his disciplined life. No wonder Fali remained at the top of the game till the very end. It is the discipline which not only catapulted Fali to the top, but by continuing to lead a disciplined life throughout his career, he was able to maintain that position for more than 4 decades. Thanks to the regularity of his habits, Fali died with his boots on. He passed away at the age of 95 and was in fact on his legs in a matter the day prior to his death and was to continue the following day. In Fali's passing, we have not only lost a great man, a great jurist, but also a great soul. My deepest condolences to the members of the Nariman family. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwarkadas. I think we are all envious that we were not part of his lunch in Bombay Bar Association. And also the points that you have given, probably all of us will replay this recording, will be put up on the website, and we'll be able to see the pointers that we've given, because I don't think many of you have made the notes, but we will go through that. Now may I request Mr. Nitin Thakkar, the President of Bombay Bar Association, to say a few words, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the distinct honor and privilege of gathering here to celebrate the life and accomplishment of one of the most eminent legal titan of our time, none other than Fali Nariman. As we embark on this journey to delve into the depths of his remarkable career, let us pause to appreciate the indelible mark he has had on the legal canvas of our nation and beyond. Fali was not merely a lawyer, he was a beacon of integrity, wisdom and courage, in the realm of jurisprudence. Fali was an institution all by himself. He was most revered of the legal luminaries of the country. What set Fali apart was not just his formidable legal acumen, but also his unwavering commitment to the justice and rule of law. Throughout his career, he has been a staunch advocate for the protection of individual rights, constitutional principles, and the independence of judiciary. His fearless pursuit of justice, even in the face of adversity, serves as an inspiration to countless lawyers and activists around the world. One of Fali's most defining traits is his unwavering integrity. In an age where ethical compromises are all too common, he remained steadfast in upholding the highest standards of professional ethics of the bar. His integrity was not merely a personal virtue, but a guiding principle that shaped his entire legal career. Whether arguing before the Supreme Court or advising governments and corporations, Fali he stayed true to his principles, earning him the respect and admiration of colleagues and adversaries alike. His versatility was able to survive due to his constant determination and grit to do better and improve himself at every step. He would never settle for less, but his trade would involve settling down, quietly thinking about his case rather than reading the case briefs again and again. He was driven by perfection in everything he did because he didn't want injustice to seep into the society. That's why he also wrote in his autobiography that the deeper human nature needs to breathe the air of liberty. What truly distinguished Fali was his extraordinary intellect and legal prowess. His mastery of the law was something I had never seen before in anyone, and his ability to dissect complex cases with clarity will always remain legendary. Whether it's constitutional law or commercial law or international law, Fali's expertise really knew no bounds. He was a force to be reckoned with. His tenaciousness earned him victories after victories. He was a brilliant strategist, and I observed it firsthand. And a fortuitous fire at Oberoi Hotel was responsible for that. It gave me an opportunity to learn a lot from Fali, as Syndicate Bank was holding premises in the basement of Oberoi Hotel in spite of expiry of leave and license agreement, and our friend Mr. Lalit Bhasin briefed me along with Fali in the matter. So, bank filed a suit under Section 6 of the Specific Relief Act to seek back possession which they lost due to fire, which hotel has taken it away. And Mr. Justice Variava decreed the suit because Fali said, yes, we have dispossessed them. After the decree, Fali filed an appeal in Supreme Court. A special leave petition was filed, and we were appearing in the special leave petition. The two judges of Supreme Court differed. One held in favor of hotel and the other held in favor of bank. The matter was referred to the third judge, and one day all of us were summoned, all the juniors who were assisting Fali in Bombay, to his suite in Oberoi. We will file a suit against bank now, and in that suit we will seek a stay of the execution of the decree of specific performance. We were wondering, as Mr. Dwarkad has said that pleadings are very important, he told us, look up this judgment, this is reported in Maharashtra Law Journal, this volume on this page, this is the observation, you must incorporate those averment in the plaint. So we all did that. Within 2 weeks we settled the plaint, and ultimately we got an injunction, we succeeded in the matter. And we really admired, he planned this matter so well, and later on Lalit told us that the day the fire took place and the first letter was written by Oberoi Hotels, each and every letter was vetted by Fali. So that's how I learned a lot in that matter. Despite his towering achievements, Fali remained remarkably humble and down to earth. He has always been a mentor and guide to young lawyers, generously sharing his knowledge and experience with the next generation. His humility and kindness endeared him to all who have had the privilege of knowing him. In words of Nelson Mandela, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. I consider myself very fortunate of receiving his blessings. There was a Bar Association of India conference in Goa celebrating 40 years of Advocates Act. One of the sessions was on ethics of lawyers. About a week before the conference, I received a call from Mr. Lalit Basin to be one of the speakers at the conference, as the speaker who was originally had agreed to come had taken ill. Fali was sitting on the first row, intensely listening to the speeches made on the subject, as the subject was very dear to him, and he believed in upholding the highest standards of ethics amongst the lawyers. At the end of the session, Fali came towards me and said, "Nitin, you spoke well. What more one can aspire than the blessings from the great man?" Later, when in 2010 I requested him to autograph his autobiography, he not only signed it but also wrote a few words of blessings. Moreover, Fali had been an outspoken voice for judicial reform and the protection of judicial independence. He has spoken out against attempts to undermine the judiciary and has consistently championed the cause of the strong, independent judiciary as a cornerstone of democracy. His advocacy for judicial accountability and transparency has been instrumental in shaping public discourse on these crucial issues. But perhaps Fali Nariman's greatest legacy lies in his role as a defender of human rights and civil liberties. Throughout his career, he has taken up the cause of the marginalized and oppressed, using the law as a tool for social justice. Whether it is fighting for the rights of minorities or women, Fali Nariman was steadfast advocate for equality and justice for all. He was a torch bearer of his generation, always at the forefront in the fight against injustice. He was looked up to by everyone who knew him. As it is rightly said, great men are forged in fire. It is a privilege of lesser men to light the flame. He was a man who came from nothing, who rose to the pinnacle through sheer hard work, and has left us with a void which cannot be filled. The people who knew him were privileged to witness him in action, and more privileged so if they had the honor of assisting him in any manner. He was akin to a raging flame. Now that he has left us, he has become so as an eternal raging flame that will always stay lit in our hearts. One can never forget a person such as him. His legacy is deeply etched in the rich legal history of our country. His life and career are a testament to the power of integrity, intellect, and industry in pursuit of justice. His bond with Bombay Bar Association was very strong. Whenever he came to Bombay for matters, he would not miss a chance of having his favorite cheese sandwiches from Mrs. Gracious. Janak has already referred to that. Bombay Bar Association honored its members who had completed more than 60 years of practice at the bar. A function was arranged in Bombay in July 23, and I inquired from Justice Nariman whether Fali would be able to travel to Mumbai for that function, and he informed that he was advised not to travel. Myself and Mr. Vishal Kanadia, our secretary, then came to Delhi in September, and we visited him, and he received us very warmly and accepted the honor. He inquired about Bombay High Court and the activities at Bombay Bar Association. He was very pleased when we mentioned about various activities we are carrying on. He agreed to do the podcast for Bombay Bar Association, but unfortunately, we lost that opportunity of recording that podcast because he had agreed to give us dates also, but it is our loss and I think I am one of the last recipient of a signed letter by him. On 21st February 24, Bombay High Court was holding a full court reference in memory of his junior, Mr. Bombay Jaiwala. I wrote an email to Fali sending a link so that he can watch the proceedings of Bombay High Court of that day. I received an email from Fali enclosing a signed letter by him expressing his delight that Bombay High Court was holding the reference for his colleague Bombay. I wrote him back to ask whether he wanted me to say anything at the reference on his behalf, but alas, the news next morning shattered all of us. Probably he replied to by my email by saying, I will let Bombay myself know whatever I want to tell him. He has shown us what it means to never compromise one's character. His approach to law and his impeccable conduct have left us with a blueprint to follow. As we celebrate his life today, let us also reaffirm our commitment to upholding the values that he has spent a lifetime defending: fairness, equality, and justice for all. Thank you, Fali uncle, for allowing us to be a part of your journey, and we assure you that our memory of you shall never fade.
Thank you, Mr. Thakkar, for sharing that Oberoi's case and showing how brilliant a strategist he was and a force to reckon with. May I now request Dr. Lalit Bhasin, former President of Bar Association of India, to say a few words.
Worthy esteemed Attorney General, all bar leaders on the dais and bar leaders here from all over the country. George Seward, he was the president of the International Bar Association for a long time, and later on he was the president emeritus of the International Bar Association. He was a good friend of Fali. He came to India at our invitation, and he wanted to go to the Supreme Court, and there Fali took him to the Supreme Court. And George Seward saw that he was going from one court to another court and all that. So Seward asked him, Fali, when will you retire? He says, in India, we lawyers don't retire, we just drop dead. That is exactly what happened. Suddenly, but without any pain and suffering, Fali passed away in a very saintly manner very recently. He was a phenomena. He was not only, everyone has, you see, paid tributes to him about his greatness as a lawyer, as a scholar, as a jurist, you see, as a great citizen, and also as a great human being. And I feel very proud that possibly in this room, I am the only one who has had the longest association with Fali Nariman, going way back, as Nitin also said, to the days of late 1960s. My first association with Fali was in 1968-69. That is after I had put in 6-7 years in the profession. Now this is my 61st year in the profession, or 62nd year. So I was in Bombay for my clients, as Nitin has said, Oberoi hotels cases and all that. And my association with Fali started at that time. And that resulted not just in a professional relationship, but as a friendly relationship. He was senior to me by about 8-9 years, 10 years. but still he did not regard me as a junior trying to assist him, but as a colleague. And that association continued even till today. That was 2024, that long association. We worked together. Possibly one feature which has been missed out in our tribute to Fali is his showcasing the Indian legal profession to the world. He became the first Indian to be elected as the president of Law Asia. Then, in the year 1997, we had the first ever International Bar Association conference when the Habitat Center, this center was inaugurated by the President of India, and that was the initiative of Fali Nariman and Mr. Shankar Das, with some assistance being provided by me and my friend Mr. Praveen Parekh. That was the time when 3,000 lawyers from all over the world had come to India to attend that conference. And that is where I say Fali Nariman showcased India's legal profession to the world, giving the signal that Indian legal profession is second to none. And that carried on, you see, when he also became the president of the executive committee of the ICJ way back in Paris and in Amsterdam. Then he got the Gruber Award, which was one of the most prestigious awards to be given to any citizen of the world. He addressed the United Nations, you see, which is a signal honor for any Indian non-governmental person to deliver such an address. And then I cannot forget the role he played so far as the Society of Indian Law Firms is concerned, that he inaugurated in the presence of the IBA, International Bar Association President, and Mr. Arun Jaitley, the Society of Indian Law Firms in the year 2000. My role, supporting role to him, as he was the president, I was the general secretary of the Bar Association, was for nearly 20 years, as rightly pointed out, from 1990 till about 2010. Fali Nariman resurrected, you see, the Bar Association of India because it had virtually become a non-entity. But together, and of course with the other team members, we were able to bring back the Bar Association of India not only in the focus of the Indian legal profession, but at the international level also. His concern for others, that is, when he came to Delhi in 1972-73 as the additional Solicitor General. At that time we did not have about 30-40 additional Solicitor Generals as we have now. At that time we only had one additional Solicitor General, and that was Mr. Fali S. Nariman, because Mr. H.R. Gokhale, the then Law Minister, requested him to come from Bombay to Delhi to become the additional Solicitor General. And he came, and as additional Solicitor General, he was an ex officio member of the Delhi Bar Council. Now, I was contesting the election. I won the first election, and then as the chairman of the Bar Council, I contested the election, and I was being opposed by one of the legendary, again, figures, that is Dr. Anand Prakash, who is no more. So, now there was a tie. I got about 6-7 votes. Dr. Anand Prakash also got 6-7 votes, and the casting vote was to be of the ASG. And that was his affection for me, that he voted for me, and I became the chairman of the Bar Council way back in 1973 till 1977. That is the longest period any chairman has had. After that, they have a sharing basis, Okay, you become for 1 year, you become for 1 year and all that. So that was the last time we had. But Fali had played a very important role of being the ex officio member in covering our activities, in guiding us, in mentoring us how to do it. And it was due to his mentorship that we were able to create for the first time, a fund with which we set up a library in the district court, Pisagari. That was the only district court at that time. Now you have about 8-9 district courts all over. So a library for the junior members of the bar who could not afford to buy the law books. It was a reference library which is still there, and it was inaugurated by the President of India and in the presence of Mr. Fali Nariman. And we were able to do, so many things there. But in the Bar Association, he had a very, very significant, important role in making this as India's most representative body of the legal profession of the country, in which all the states, all the district bar associations, all the high court bar associations have been involved. So when my election as attorney, as the chairman of the Bar Council was actually challenged, and the appeal had gone to the Bar Council of India, where Mr. Ram Jethmalani was the chairman, and Mr. Rajendra Singh, he was the vice chair. So the appeal had come to them, and question was whether Mr. Nariman could have cast his, vote. And when the matter came to Jethmalani, he said, Nariman cast his vote, there can't be no doubt about it. Therefore, that the challenge to my election was not accepted, and I remained the chairman. So Fali was there have been many, many great lawyers in India, starting with Mr. Setalwal, Daftari, Mr. Paraswaran, so many others, Mr. Palkiwala, Mr. Sirvai. But Fali, I would describe him as the first international Indian lawyer. He showcased India to the world, and his was the most representative voice. He had a sense of humor also. People may say that it was a dry sense of humor, but no, it was a real sense of humor. People may think that he is feeling annoyed, but in his annoyance he would convey, what was that. I remember very distinctly that I and my wife Neena had gone to brief him in some matter here in Delhi, and there were some loose papers which Neena handed over to Fali. He said, what is this, tie them up together and all that. And we were sitting in his office, in his room there. Neena said, sir, we don't have any clip or a pin and all that. Take that clip out of your bonnet, and just have to put them together. So it was, one can say it was a show of annoyance, but no, that was his sense of humor also. And his great work, and I must also share with you one thing, although people may think I am being presumptuous, but he had great affection for me. Which is also reflected in his book, Before the Memory Fades. He makes a very, very special reference to my role in the Bar Association of India. And in that book, and I am very proud of this fact, that there is only one photograph for other lawyers, only one photograph where two lawyers feature along with Fali Nariman, that is Subhash and I. His great work, his great contribution has been carried on by his successors, such eminent great lawyers like Mr. Anil Devan, Mr. R.K.P. Shankar Das. Then I also got elected between 2016 till 2019. We did our bit, but the contribution of Mr. Devan and Mr. Shankar Das has been very, very significant. I think the best way to pay tribute to Fali is to carry on with his great work, and that is being done in a very systematic manner by involving others, by Mr. Prashant Kumar. He is trying to showcase India again, you see, to the world by entering into protocols, bilateral agreements with the other bar associations all over the world. So it is a befitting thing, you see, that he decided to have this rule of law convention in memory of our great leader, bar leader, international bar leader, Mr. Fali Nariman. And I'm sure his great work will be carried on by the other bar leaders who are here, the vice presidents, the president-elect Mr. Amarjit Singh Chandiok, and we have Mr. Shyam Devan here, who is the president of Law Asia as well as the vice president of Bar Association of India, Mr. Janak Gorkadas. They are all very, very eminent people, and with the help of these, and Amarjit is a very dynamic General Secretary, I think the work of Mr. Fali Nariman will be continued with great vigor and with great results, you see. So that is the way we pay our tribute to our departed leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhasin, for sharing such an important part of history. We didn't know that he played such an important role in casting vote and also bringing in about 3,000 international lawyers to India way back then. Now may I request Mr. Shyam Devan, our Vice President, to speak few words.
Thank you very much, Amarjit. Distinguished speakers, colleagues, friends, both on the dais as well as in the hall. It's really a great pleasure for me to be given this opportunity to share a few words and thoughts about Fali Nariman, truly a giant in the legal profession and a champion of core values which all of us have to commit ourselves to: independence of the judiciary, rule of law, and of course human rights, which was something which was very, very dear to him, and he brought it up at several international conferences and on the international stage. But before I begin, just a few sort of recollections on Mr. Nariman. I thought I should say a few words on Bapsi Nariman, because this was really, as was mentioned by so many, quite a team. And Bapsi Nariman, who passed in June 2020, was a stupendous support for Fali right through, but in her own right was a great achiever. And amongst the achievements which remain with us is that she has documented her skills as a gourmet cook in several books. There are books on Parsi cuisine, there are books on Italian cuisine, there are books on, I was just checking this out, and it was how to cook with yogurt, and a huge feast of preparations for those who are interested. And then I was just discussing Bapsi with my mother, and she said that, look, do you know, she was absolutely instrumental in setting up a very, very important medical center, which is run by the Delhi Commonwealth Women's Association, east of Kailash, and which treats up to 80,000 patients every year. And I thought I should just begin, because this is really quite a remarkable set of achievements of Bapsi's. The clinic, of course, continues. It continues to render tremendous service to the community. And to many of us, I think when we think of Mr. Nariman, we also think of Bapsi Nariman. There's one area in which I suspect she differed from Mr. Nariman, Fali Nariman, and that was she was very, very forthright in her speech. She was very direct and she always spoke her mind. In the spirit of Bapsi, I remember several years ago, I had written an article in a newspaper which, followed her kind of lead and direction and was, at least in my view, forthright. And a few days later, Fali Nariman met my wife Madhvi in the corridors, and she said, "Tell your husband to stop writing about these things in the newspaper." Because, and when you visit Mr. Nariman's speech writings in particular, you will find that they are much more subtle, they're much more balanced. They are not necessarily as, they're forthright, but in a manner and in a tone which is far more persuasive than making a very, very strong point. And that, I feel, was part of the secret of his advocacy. So the earliest memories, I was trawling my memory bank and I was thinking, when was the earliest memories of my interactions with Mr. Fali Nariman? And I remember that I have an old little grainy square photograph, black and white. It dates back to the late 1960s. And I remember this because it was my first camera. It was an Agfa Click 3. And the photograph has Mr. Fali Nariman and his family at the Raceview Hotel in Mahabaleshwar. And it's grainy, but I mean, it's still distinct, and you can see his smiling visage and his sort of encouraging and the little, it's not quite a twinkle in the eye because there was a camera shake, but there was still a very genial look about him, which is the manner in which we all got to know him. The second memory actually involves both Mr. Nitin Thakkar and Mr. Fali Nariman. And this was at Islam Gymkhana in Bombay, where there was a cricket match between the solicitors and the council on the Bombay High Court. And I was sort of brought there by my father. And the highlight, of course, of the afternoon was not so much the cricket, but it was the tremendous biryani which was served at Islam Gymkhana. But I remember Mr. Nariman, by the way, I should add, the president of the Bombay Bar Association at that time was a very slim and lanky gentleman who kept wickets for the council's team. And Mr. Nariman hurled the ball from covers, and it's the memory of a child which sort of never disappears. And it was a direct hit on the stumps. And I said, wow, that was really something, and they got a run out on that occasion. So this, of course, speaks to what Mr. Dwarkadas also mentioned about his discipline. He was interested in his sports, his walking, his exercise, etc. His time for prayer, which was, I think, a very, very important theme, which recurred, I found, in a number of speeches which he made. When it was never in a sort of a morbid sense, but he always, when paying tribute to people who had passed, etc., would always make a reference that we really don't quite know as to what is going to happen in that next phase after we sort of leave this world and probably go onto a higher plane. There are two themes which I thought I should just dwell on, which have been touched on, but I thought I'll just expand on it. One was as a young lawyer, and I mean the remarkable theatre which accompanied Fali Nariman in court. It also accompanied him in conference, and I'll come to that in a moment. But I have never quite seen anyone in court who has such a commanding presence in terms of just, theatre. I mean, we've all been to theatres, and there's that one star actor whom you just can't get your eye off when he's on the stage or when she's on the stage. And I guess to some extent it happens even in the movies, where your attention just gets drawn. It's some sort of a magical quality. And I think Mr. Nariman had that in abundance. And the first time I witnessed it was, I was interning in Kanga and Company. And this speaks to what Mr. Dwarkadas also mentioned, that no matter how distinguished you are, if you get a brief, you have to go and present your case, case to the best of the ability. So I was suddenly given this task of accompanying Mr. Nariman. Before, at that time, it used to be called CGAT. And he was happy to accept this brief before CGAT. It was obviously a very high stakes matter. And we had an excellent bench of Mr. Jairaman and Trivedi, and they didn't know who Mr. Fali Nariman was. So when Mr. Fali Nariman stood up and, they started questioning him, etc., and at some point, that whole sense of enormous theatre, and the bench was in retreat because how was this going to happen? So they asked him, what is your name? And I remember him saying, Nariman. And then the whole thing, the whole complexion of the bar, of the bench completely changed just by the mention of that name. And that's, I think, another lesson which I have carried with me as a young counsel who's observed Mr. Nariman in action. That he had an extraordinarily, I think Mr. Chagla spoke about it, he had an extraordinarily subtle but persuasive manner on obtaining a certain dominance over the bench, which happened remarkably. And it wasn't with, some sort of a drumbeat of arguments or any of that. It was tactical, it was always very persuasive, always very respectful, and incredibly strategic. And here I'll speak to two things, which I think Mr. Dwarkadas and Mr. Thakkar, who've assisted him in probably many more matters than I have, will also concur, which is the industry of Mr. Fali Nariman. Whether it was a pleading, whether it was a list of dates, whether it was a note of submissions, this was, it may not have reached a gold standard level, but that wasn't the point. The point was putting in all that effort to try and attain that gold standard. And it was always, continuously questioning yourself, questioning as to whether this can be improved, it can be put a little differently, just so that it makes and has that requisite impact. And I think that pursuit of excellence is something which each one of us has to carry forward if there is a legacy that we have to take forward in terms of an inspiration. The point I want to make again, and this is really by way of emphasis because Mr. Bhasin has spoken about this, was Mr. Nariman's extraordinary contribution. Actually, I'll just put two, and I'll sort of quickly package both the points. One was made by Mr. Dwarkadas and one was made by Mr. Bhasin. And the point about Mr. Dwarkadas was that he mentioned the year 40, but probably it was closer to 50. Mr. Fali Nariman was the lawyer to go to for 50 years. Right from the 1970s, I think from Bombay right till 2020, if there was a problem which you had, at least in the Bombay solicitor lot, and I don't think it was very different in other parts of the country either, what do? So the whole answer was, let's go and see what Fali has to say about this whole issue. And I think that is just a remarkable period of time. It's like, we always are very sort of extra, we admire Gavaskar and we admire Tendulkar and we admire Roger Federer. But imagine being top of the game for 50 years. That is just something incredible. So despite these, legendary sportsmen, etc., I think in terms of the lawyering, the sheer lawyering in those areas of corporate law, in those areas of arbitration, Mr. Nariman remained at the absolute helm of our profession for 50 years. And the second point, which was Mr. Bhasin's point, was that he really, I think the expression which I borrow from him is showcase, but apart from showcase, and you heard what Cyrus Das said, speaking for the Malaysian bar, and I think we probably will have a video recording by Mr. Upul Jayasurya as well, speaking from the Sri Lankan bar perspective. But he put Indian lawyers and the quality of the products, all of you, out there in the open stage, on the world stage. And this was really a manner of not just opening up and showcasing as to what we're capable of, but also telling the world that, look, these are very, very high quality lawyers, and not just lawyers in terms of sheer lawyering, in terms of your meticulousness of preparation, etc., but also on the universal values of rule of law, independence, judiciary, and human rights. And I think that has really helped elevate our profession in the eyes of the global community. And of course, with Indian lawyers moving out across jurisdictions, they've also, the world has learned more and more about our courts and about our jurisprudence, which is a proud feature indeed. I want to just quickly segue into Mr. Nariman's, choice of topics, rather choice of titles for his books. And I like really two of them. The one is God Save the Honorable the Supreme Court. And it came out at a time when I said, wow, I mean, what is this book about? And then, of course, when you're into a few pages, he reminds you that, look, it's not as if I'm talking about the Indian Supreme Court, or am I? It's really, I'm talking about the call which the usher gives when the US Supreme Court assembles, which is God Save the Supreme Court of the United States and God Save America. But he uses that line very subtly, and he puts it right on the cover of his book at a time when, and then his opening chapter in that book is about it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. And he really questions. So he's always balancing, but he's also making the point in a sharp manner and in a manner which makes you reflect. And I think the last book which he wrote, which is You Must Know Your Constitution, I think that has an abiding message, or at least that's the message I took away, which is basically he speaks to citizens and says that, look, you've got something really valuable here. Please educate yourself about it. Please learn about it. And please use those rights, those remedies, those values, which must endure if the Republic is to endure in any meaningful manner. And here I was just wondering this morning, and the Hindu had a piece, and I was wondering how would Mr. Nariman reflect on this? What would he say? I know he'd say it very subtly, but the Hindu piece was on our NCERT recommendations to the changing of our textbooks. And one of the references is, for example, one of the recommendations is that insofar as a standard 12 sociology textbook is concerned, references to destitution caused to Adivasis because of the large dams which we built in the 60s and the 70s and in the 80s, and which resulted in migrations, that line has been dropped. And that was from the standard 12 textbook on sociology. And the NCERT has also dropped a reference to the Babri Masjid demolition from its political science textbooks. And this gives me, thinking about this whole business. That is, of course, still at a recommendation stage. But I was reading Peter Hessler's essay on Chinese students' experiences in America. And he uses two excellent expressions there. One is he talks about Chinese universities as an oasis of political compliance. And I think that's something which we have to think of. Are we moving towards a society of an oasis of political compliance? And the final expression which he uses is, he talks about educated acquiescence. And I think Mr. Nariman, all said and done, would be certainly of the view that educated acquiescence is not something which members of the legal profession should aspire for. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Diwan, for telling us he is a superstar for all of us. Due to paucity of time, we won't be able to play the virtual messages of Mr. Gordon Hughes, Secretary Law Asia, and Mr. Upal Jayasuriya, former President, Sri Lanka Bar Association, but we'll upload it on our website. May I now request Mr. Subhash Sharma, who's representing the family of Mr. Fali S. Nariman, as well as who was close associate for many, many years, as we have heard, to say a few words. Only request is we have about 5 minutes or so because our next session starts. And
I need at least 10 people. Okay, thank you very much.
distinguished guests, divine souls, ladies and gentlemen. I might be the last batsman to speak, but I heard your amazing and wonderful speeches. Of course, I know we are running against time. I will be reading my subjective speech to save your time and remain focused on the points, and I will look inwards because I can speak for days together on him. Before I begin, I just like to say that I am truly humbled and honored to be here, and I thank my friend Prashant Kumar, President of the Bar Association, and others for giving me the opportunity to speak and in voicing my tributes to my great mentor. I will definitely not be able to do any justice and fall short immensely while describing the great legend who stood like a mighty Himalayan range, protecting the liberties of a common man, freedom of press, democratic institutions, and independence of judiciary for more than 7 decades. He has been my mentor, my guide, my role model for 38 years, and now my prophet. I must start with an apology to him by saying, "Dearest sir, I am about to do something what you always hated and break your cardinal rule, that is to brag about yourself. I am compelled to do so today as the circumstances demand, and also because as lawyers we love loopholes. That is, you maintain that let others point your good points or good virtues. Dearest sir, today I am that the other who has taken this stage, just reliving some of your precious moment of life and sharing some anecdotes which have not been known to the people at large. I take great joy in being the other today, sharing your virtues of mind and heart. Please tolerate my role in these anecdotes to understand his true nature. Mr. Nariman, like life, lived to be most unpredictable, uncontrollable, and often challenging, and had no interest in a pre-packaged idea of anything. He enjoyed giving surprises to everyone. But on the other hand, he had a wider perspective, humility, and acceptance of life. He was very energetic, alert, witty, devoted to his families and friends. He had a great humor and a beautiful smile. He always showed largeness of spirit, tolerance, and ability to see past differences and search for common ground. He always lived in the present moment every day and made right choices. Every moment was a real test of his values. He passed this test again and again and again every day. That is why when he talked of values, virtues, and duties, he did not ring hollow in him. It was not just words for him, but it was the truth which he had lived and for which he was prepared to die. What he thought, what he said, and what he did was exactly the same. He had an extraordinary determination and the power of believing in himself. I recall a building case at Connaught Place, 1989, where the construction of the building was stopped. The matter was fixed for final disposal in court number 3. And that evening, Mr. Nariman had to go abroad. The court divided the time equally between the two councils, NDMC council in the morning and in the afternoon between 2 to 4 to Mr. Nariman. Strangely, around 1 o'clock before lunch, the NDMC council asked for 10 minutes after lunch, and that was agreed. But this 10 minutes stretched to 30 minutes and then 45 minutes and then crossed 3 p.m. when the court and we objected to it. But the NDMC council again asked for 5 minutes and 3 minutes, and each time stretching, and finally stopped at 3:40 p.m. Mr. Nariman had just 20 minutes for his arguments. In his 20 minutes performance, it was a great treat to watch. He was quick, articulative, effective, precise and like a thunder. He argued the whole case, and I was just providing him the ammunition. He believed and proved his excellency and the ability to finish his arguments in that little 20 minutes time without any complaint or losing his peace of mind. He was totally focused and exemplary. The building got constructed. He was a simple man and with extraordinary capabilities. His desires were very limited. Every day was a new day for him with the wider perspective of life and always spoke for humanity at large. He considered it as a part of a duty to uphold values and principles which were near to his heart. He had an unwavering commitment to the principles of democracy, the constitution, rule of law, separation of power, federalism, and even the civil and criminal laws and procedures. He knew that the ancient, diverse and noisy nation like ours, rules and laws and values and democratic institutions hold us together. They help make our shared life orderly even when we disagree among ourselves. He believed in honest talks and listened to different opinions. He knew that if we change the truth to fit our needs, our democracy will fail. He always supported the cause of free press and independence of judiciary for healthy debates. I am just recalling the NJC matter, which started on 18th of April 2015, and it was a crucial day on 12th of May 2015, where the judges were deciding whether the matter has to go to larger bench. He started his argument by looking back twice, and everyone believed that he is searching for something. And I was just sitting with him. Mr. Nariman then started his argument by saying, "My client, my lords, is the independence of judiciary." This moving act had a great and subtle impact on the court, and the matter was heard by 5 judges and not by 9 judges. He lived by his traditional virtues of liberty and justice, which gave him strength. He was honest and he spared no one. He loved and defended freedom and stood against injustice and abuse of power. Something deep inside him always made him stand up for the little guy on the street. This was his real strength and conviction which came from his soul. Now I am narrating an incident which took place 20 years ago in court number 2. While waiting for his matter, he saw in the court that the petitioner in person was arguing the matter. The presiding judge got irritated and angry and said to the petitioner that "I won't hear you." But the petitioner still insisted. The presiding judge ordered the petitioner to be dragged out of the court by the security marshals. Despite the fully packed court, it was only Mr. Nariman stood up against this injustice which he felt in his heart. And he told the court, "My lords, you cannot do this. You are here to deliver justice. You cannot deny this right to him. Hear him. You have no right to throw the petitioner out of this court." The presiding judge refused to do so. Mr. Nariman was so upset that he left the court without appearing in his 2 matters before him. And at the noon, he visited the Chief Justice residence to complain about the incident. The Chief Justice later intervened in the matter and the petitioner was heard by some other bench. He said, "It is the lawyer's duty to stand up for others when someone cannot speak for themselves." He was a great speaker and had set a high standard. He had the determination always to do right thing in the right way and to the very best of his ability. This was the greatest hallmark, and that made him special. He possessed the great virtues of morality, brotherhood, tolerance, and respect of our great Indian civilization. He also followed his true religious faith. All these virtues and principles expressed by him is also shared by our great founding fathers in our constitution. A day before his passing away on 20th February, he wrote his last article about the values of the preamble, which is going to be published in the forthcoming book, The Indian Supreme Court at 75. Even at the age of 95, he was very clear in his memory, clear mind, and remained focused until the end. I am reminded of the court proceedings in Ram Setu matter in 2008 before the Chief Justice Court. And one of the justices happened to ask Mr. Nariman, "Do you believe in Lord Ram?" Immediately he stood up and Pat gave the reply, "My junior Mr. Sharma tells me that I was born on a Lord Rama's day." The whole court was in laughter for his presence of mind. I am sure you have heard many of his historical cases, but today I am going to share some memories of his creative capability and depth of knowledge. This was before the Company Law Board, Patel Engineering case, 1999. And due to bad weather, the Bombay flight of the solicitors, advocates and clients were cancelled. Only one brilliant counsel was able to attend along with me that evening conference with Mr. Nariman. Mr. Nariman ripped us off into pieces that day. He said, "You don't have any facts. You have a hopeless case. Now you both sit the whole night and find some case law on this point from company cases, Company Law Journal, Butterworth's cases for last 30 years if you want to save your client." We both worked the whole night till morning. We could not find any single case and we were helpless. In the morning conference at 8:30 a.m., he asked for the case laws. We said there is nothing on the point. Immediately he remarked, "You have no facts, you have no law, a useless case, God help you." Then we went to the court. We witnessed the outstanding performance of his. His confidence, his talent was beyond compare. He put all his creativity, innovation, depth of legal knowledge into his stormy performance. Judges were mesmerized. And this was his true self. And we won the case. Now I am coming to the another aspect of his life with me, the Guru-Shish connection, because people have been asking me and the events also at times. In this world of relativity, the Guru-disciple relationship is amongst the highest form of relationship of the soul. But due to the modern and worldly views, it has lost that soul connection and is not revered and honored. However, I would like to give you a brief inside and outside look of this rare relationship, the inside view. It took me few years to unlearn what I had learned in my life. I had to learn to be humble, develop love for learning, giving up desires and letting go the ego before him. He helped me to remain focused. I got aligned to his way of thinking and principles of life. The outer view. On the surface, he and I were from different generation, different background, different culture, and a totally different mindset. I always maintained my cool and calm because I had no choice. But he never, just the opposite. We had differences every day. And he in his fit of anger never hesitated to tell me at least once a day that how I goofed up this thing and how I messed it up this thing. I never reacted, but I adopted the Gandhian Satyagraha in replying him. In silence, not reacting to what he said, or sometimes ready to walk away from him in the matter. Now, but for all our differences and all our sparks together, we had a long-standing respect, support, and love for each other. We never doubted each other's perception and wisdom, and we always worked as one team, whatever the stormy weather was. I understood his hurried and aggressive approach towards life, as he wanted to be a perfect man. After Bepsi's death on 9th June 2020, I became his confidant and his companion till the end. I remember an incident at the funeral of Justice H.R. Khanna in February 2008, when former Chief Justice J.S. Verma saw both Mr. Nariman and me standing together. He walked up to us from behind and placed his arm on each of our shoulders and said, "I like this rare association of you, both Guru-Shishya culture," and asked both of us to keep it going. We maintained it to the end. It was always a great joy working with him for 38 years. Finally, Mr. Nariman will be remembered for his leadership, which had wider perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance, along with his attitude of forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. We learned that leadership is about falling in love with the people that you serve and the people falling in love with you. But for him, his leadership was about serving the people selflessly and putting the common good ahead of his personal interest. We must follow his virtues and principles to become great moral leaders for the future. We will not see the likes of this man again on this earth. I will miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Subhashji, for telling us about your Guru-Shishya relationship and the conscience keeper. We welcome Justice Amanullah amidst us for the next session, which is the inaugural session. We have run out of time, so I don't have time for vote of thanks, but I just want to sum it up by saying thank you each one of you for coming from far and wide and paying such rich tributes. And we'll just have a 5-minute break when we will rearrange and start the next session. In the meanwhile, if you can just have a 2 minutes break. We'll just change the boards and remove the chairs, etc. to start the next session.